These are some NBA players whose stats lied, and we gotta start with Christian Wood. It can get pretty easy to look at a player's stat line, see 20 and 10, and think that this guy is gonna be great, but that's not how it worked out for Christian Wood. His breakout season came with the Pistons in the 2019-2020 season. After bouncing in and out of the league for a few years, he finally delivered, averaging 13 and 6 in just 21 minutes per game, shooting 56% from the field. Christian Wood appeared to be on his way up, being one of the more productive role players in the NBA. And the best of the best, when it comes to playing their role, a lot of times mean more than what most refer to as a star player, if that makes sense. What I mean to say is that the potential boost that Christian Wood could provide is enormous to any team's roster. In just 21 minutes per game, we saw this guy putting up efficient rebounding numbers at the 4 spot, while shooting over 55% from the field and nearly 40% from 3. He's not getting bullied around, he's cleaning the glass, spacing for others, and when the opportunity comes for him to score the ball, he's doing so incredibly efficiently. Basketball is a game of very small margins. Every percent matters. And with a player this efficient and versatile, these are the guys that turned contenders into champions, right? In the following season, we'd only see Christian Wood's stock rise as he was given more volume on a Houston Rockets squad after the departure of James Harden. Wood was dropping close to 20 and 10 with shooting splits above 50% from the field and again close to 40% from deep. What is there not to like? If you saw those numbers without context, you'd think he was the new age of big men in the NBA, and on paper, he was. Teams are always looking for big men who can shoot and stretch the floor, and Wood was capable of that and even more. But with Wood, there's a kicker. His game couldn't translate to winning basketball. In the season to follow, we would see a slight statistical deduction, despite being 26 and in theory entering his physical prime. The next year, we'd see the same, before an enormous drop-off with the Lakers, down to just 7 points per game for the 2024 season. You may be asking yourself, why the hell is this the case? And for someone who hasn't seen him play, you'd be asking the right questions. Empty stats is a phrase that gets tossed around the NBA world a lot, to the point where it's lost its meaning a bit, but is the best definition of a phenomenon that we see quite a bit. Seeing a player increase their production on a shit team, of course, doesn't always mean a player got better. Even shit teams drop 110 points in the NBA, and somebody's got to put the ball in the basket. But for Christian Wood, maintaining his efficiency should really hold some weight in showing that he wasn't just a placeholder on bad teams, he was a legitimate weapon that teams struggled to slow down. In his 4-season peak, he never once made the playoffs. Sure, this wasn't 100% his fault. The Pistons and Rockets were pretty shit and needed Wood to step up during these times. Once he finally landed on a playoff team, not even a contender per se, he lost out on big minutes to Taurean Prince and Rui Hachimura, and when he was put in the game, he was playing worse than he ever had before. Teams don't even want this dude now, which is 29 years old. He's literally not on a team right now. He battled some injury issues that didn't help, but the more you dig into Christian Wood, the more the answers appear to be clear. In Dallas, reports came out that he was a bit difficult for Luka when they were both on the floor. He was a black hole and didn't give the team anything on defense. With the Lakers, the story was even clearer. He had some knee issues, wasn't blending with ball-dominant players, and was replaced by fucking Alex Len just a couple years after being in All-Star conversations. Frankly, the answer to Christian Wood's mystery seems a bit confusing. Maybe he was a bit of a menace to teammates, there's reports he's late to all team events, and maybe he's a bit unlikable. When you watch one of these games that Wood isn't putting up 25, the answers are pretty fucking clear, man. Christian Wood is one talented lost soul. He can knock down threes and finish inside, but he seems to be operating completely outside the flow of the offense, focused on getting his when the ball hits his hands. Sure, even in these scenarios, he's scoring at a high clip, and that goes to show he's an NBA level talent, easily. But with this approach to basketball, this leaves you two options. One, be a tank commander, typically a young guy with talent you're hoping to unlock a bit over your rebuilds that you can give shots to over a few years while you're losing. Wood did this for years. It was pretty fun, but inevitably, the job security proved weak. These guys have shelf lives of running backs, with an assload of competition who could take their place. Option 2, and the better long-term solution, is learn how to play a role on a competitive team, or at least a decent team. Christian Wood straight up refused to do this. Dropping an efficient 10 to 12 while spacing the floor and defending pick and rolls was all he needed to do. But instead, once the ball hit his hand, instead of swinging the ball back to Luka or LeBron and scoring the ball in the rhythm of the offense, He forced us to watch the Christian Wood show. It was delusional from a guy like him. In a league that was probably 80% less talented than Christian Wood, the unwillingness to adapt to a legitimate role to elevate his team may just have cost him his job at 29 years old. Christian Wood was a nightmare finish to a career, but Zach LaVine's career feels much more like a prolonged basketball purgatory. LaVine to me is the most interesting player in the NBA. This guy's scoring talent is comparable to very few who have ever played the game of basketball, and that's no exaggeration. If you showed somebody the 1980s Zach LaVine highlights of his 87-inch vertical and 42% three ball with a 28 point per game average, it would be like showing a caveman an iPhone. Yet in the NBA today, it appears that no teams, and not even really fans, value him as a legitimate piece. Even though talent-wise, he should be on his way to the Hall of Fame. Now, as a Minnesota guy, I've watched this guy like a hawk since he entered the league, and I can't say I've seen a path quite like this before. Although some people like to claim he came into the league the same player he is today, I get why they're saying that, but I don't think that's correct, and let me explain to you why. LaVine came into the league as a combo guard with shot selection issues, raw athleticism, and rather low basketball IQ. Although some elements of these issues are certainly still visible in the Zach LaVine we see today, year to year, you could slowly see the molding of who Zach LaVine would actually become. After coming into the league on a dogshit Wolves squad that forced him to replace Ricky Rubio at point guard, his first taste of NBA basketball was out of position where these issues were amplified. Through playing through his mistakes and learning the game the hard way, we slowly saw him cut his turnover numbers down pretty heavily over the course of his career, although it's true he certainly never became an NBA-level playmaker. It wasn't until his third season in Minnesota with the arrival of Tom Thibodeau that his role really started getting clear. With Wiggs and Towns serving as the focal point of the offense, LaVine saw the lowest usage of his entire career as the clear-cut third option, yet in this role that most would consider reduced, we saw what was the best version of LaVine by far with an efficient 19 a night on 46 and 39% shooting splits. This guy could play his role, man. He pushed in transition, found backdoors, and most importantly could sniff out space on the perimeter and knock down catch-and-shoot jump shots at a crazy high clip. Say what you want about his passing, but when it comes to his off-ball instincts, there's nothing low IQ about him. LaVine's breakout season of sort would be cut short to an ACL tear that would end his tenure in Minnesota after the Jimmy Butler trade that off-season. But the groundwork was laid for the final form of Zach LaVine. It took a year to get his groove back after the injury, but once he did, he gave us what we wanted. 24 a night, 25 a night, eventually 27 a night. Zach LaVine was putting the ball in the basket as much as anyone in the NBA, all while shooting upwards of 42% from deep. I mean, if you adjust for usage rates, Zach LaVine was basically putting up fucking Shai Gilgeous-Alexander levels of scoring and efficiency, all while doing so against defenses that could afford to center their attention on him. He was an all-star with very few flaws in his scoring repertoire. At his best, with guys like Lonzo and Caruso serving as secondary ball handlers and playmakers, this allowed LaVine to float off ball, get into whatever action he likes, without worrying about getting the ball back. When it landed back in his hands, he was one of the most elite catch-and-shoot guys in the game. He could shoot off the bounce from 3 even, comparable to few guys ever. His mid-range game was deadly, and this was still the guy we saw hitting the between-the-legs dunk from the fucking free throw line. It made sense at the time why you maxed this guy. He was the centerpiece of their offense, of course. He's a scoring juggernaut, and with great role players like Lonzo Ball and Alex Caruso filling the defensive and playmaking holes in his game, Vooch stretching the floor, and Patrick Williams, who's supposed to be a stretch four on the all-defensive teams, this looked like a very capable roster for the future, to say the least. Unfortunately, the death of this Bulls team came from some injuries early on. Losing guys like Lonzo might seem small, but when you're asking guys to do things they're not used to, the base of the House of Cards was just pulled from this team. It turned from a cohesive unit that checked all the boxes of a modern NBA contender and turned into this weird offensive system where DeRozan and LaVine tried to not get in each other's way, and nobody other than Alex Caruso wanted to play any defense. For years, the Bulls and LaVine, now on a max contract, were stuck treading water, still scoring the ball well at around 24 a game, still staying highly efficient, and still losing games on this mismatched roster. Despite constant efforts to trade the man, the trade market doesn't lie, and it became clear rather quickly that teams weren't valuing LaVine as a max player, and then came the whispers labeling Zach LaVine's box scores as empty. For a guy that doesn't do anything other than score, the NBA made it known that LaVine simply doesn't do enough to warrant this type of money. And frankly, I think that contract was the biggest killer to his career in the long run. Although not being the worst defender in the world, Zach LaVine should be a much better one with his natural gifts, as teammate Chris Dunn has even called out in the past. And without the ability to facilitate well, Zach LaVine's role in the NBA proved to be much more suited as being a sixth man type of talent than the star of a franchise, and no one's maxing sixth men unless you're Manu Ginobili. To be fair, in a league that appears to be weeding out the old score-first, inefficient, microwave sixth men of the past, Zach LaVine on the back nine of his career could certainly come in and be one of the pioneers of this new brand of professional scorers. But really, this is just one more what could have been in LaVine's career. He's 30 years old at this point, and all we have to look back on is the what could have beens. What if he never left Minnesota, became what he could have been defensively, and grew with that young core that looked to be the future of the NBA? What if Chicago's core stayed healthy while LaVine being able to focus on what he did best while he was at all-star level? What if he never signed his name on that max contract and was freed onto a team where his talents could be put to better use? I mean, after all these years of watching DeRozan and LaVine not work together, they somehow managed to end up together once again on a franchise that's even more dysfunctional than the Chicago Bulls. I don't even know how the hell they did that. At the end of the day, Zach LaVine wasn't some wasted talent, he was exactly who he was. A gifted scorer who, year after year, got tossed into roles that demanded things he was never built to provide. The passing, the defense, the leadership, it wasn't him. And because teams kept forcing the issue, his strengths never translated into a winning impact people expected. He'll be remembered as an explosive bucket getter, but also as a reminder that not every talent fits neatly into our perception of what a star should be. When it comes to Zach LaVine, his talent is undeniable. But when it comes to guys like Hassan Whiteside, I'm denying that shit. Whiteside had the league in the palm of his hand for a little while. He was spanking shots like they misbehaved, putting up block totals like Dikembe Mutombo, caught lobs, and tricked some people into thinking he was doing a Dwight Howard impression. But once people realized that box scores can serve as an optical illusion, all his hype evaporated. His rise came out of nowhere. Most people probably didn't know he existed before the 2014-2015 season. He showed up out of nowhere at 25 years old after 2 years overseas and randomly started dropping triple doubles and shit. It was pretty weird. In his first full season with the team, he was third in DPOY voting and led the league in blocks with a crazy high 3.7 a game. On the stat sheet alone, it looked like this guy was one of the best rim protectors of all time, hiding in plain sight, while eventually putting up totals like 17 points and 14 rebounds a night to pair. This type of production obviously stands out and earned him a 4-year, $98 million contract. But over time, people started taking a closer look at Hassan's very interesting production. It didn't take very long for people to figure out that Whiteside wasn't a max player. He wasn't really an energy guy, and he wasn't even a reliable defender. And I know how insane that sounds after taking a single glance at his block totals. His stats were some of the emptiest you'll ever see. He chased blocks instead of playing real defense, constantly got baited by pump fakes, and was easy to get out of position. Miami fans quickly realized that just because Whiteside got his numbers didn't mean the Heat were actually better with him on the court. Eric Spoelstra started benching him in crunch time against smaller lineups because he wasn't fast enough to guard a smaller center, and he wasn't really going to try either. He left games before they were even over and had defensive lapses that were impossible to overlook. He fished for high stats without limiting the other team's stats. It's really the most elementary way I could put it. I mean, referring to Hassan Whiteside as a defensive stud is basically the equivalent of saying that Allen Iverson was a lockdown for leading the league in steals. Gambling in passing lanes doesn't equate to consistent, effective defense, and block hunters are definitely the same damn way. Hassan Whiteside had a quick 3-year boom in the NBA, before his minutes in production dropped consistently until he was out of the NBA at 32 years old. By the time he should have been in his prime, he had already dropped to 12 and 11, and that's exactly when Miami replaced him with Bam Adebayo, a smaller center who didn't put up crazy block totals, but played with energy, IQ, and switchability. Bam was the anti-Whiteside, and infinitely more effective without the flashy box scores. I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, Hassan Whiteside could have worked a little harder, stayed more disciplined, yada yada yada, but if Coach Spo didn't unlock Whiteside, I think he just was who he was. He managed to trick us for a while when he was on the floor. I got tricked too. I mean, watching him dunk on people, send shots, and then looking at the box score at the end of the game and seeing he had like 22 rebounds, it was kind of sick. Every once in a while, even in the era of analytics, there's just a player that slips through the cracks and appears better than he really was. And that kind of just seems to be the story of Hassan Whiteside. Now, Whiteside has gone from overhyped to basically never talked about again, but the career of Rudy Gay is much different. This guy stuck around for 17 years. He obviously was very good at something, but at the same time, has the easiest shortcomings to pick apart in the NBA. I mean, his weaknesses weren't exactly as hidden as Whiteside, but his talent was also so in your face that opposing fans yelled, "Not this guy," when he had the ball against them in crunch time.
Defense! Defense! No, it's Rudy Gay! No! 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 Not this guy! Not this guy! No! Oh my God! You fucking asshole! No! No!
Over the course of his career, Rudy Gay kind of just was what he was. He consistently scored close to 20 points per game. He was a bit inconsistent, putting up shooting splits around 45 from the field and 35% from 3, which is pretty decent, I guess. He had elite athleticism, he had some sick posters, and could knock down shots pretty well. Depending on who you ask, some fans thought of him as one of the most underrated players of the time, given that he never made an All-Star game while putting up All-Star level scoring totals. But really with Gay, that's where the positives kind of ends. I'm not saying that he couldn't get buckets, but not all 20 pieces were made equally. Firstly, this guy just wasn't swinging the rock. He paved the way for the shot checkers of the future. Secondly, this guy played no defense whatsoever. Lastly, this guy really just didn't have a bag. He kind of just ran around people like Usain Bolt. I mean, you gotta watch his highlights for like 15 minutes to catch a single crossover. I mean, he just piled up stats and was sick in 2K. That's kind of what we remember him for. And he didn't add enough to his teams to make them any more of contenders than they already were. After getting hurt prior to the 2011 playoffs, the Grizzlies proved that point when they shifted to Mike Conley and Zach Randolph and beat the 1-seed Spurs in the first round by playing strict, tough team basketball. They turned it into full-on grit and grind Grizzlies. They were the 4-seed in the next season, but got beat by Lob City in the first round, while Rudy Gay struggled to get his three-point shot going. And the questions came up again. Why couldn't Rudy Gay hit a couple shots to help the Clippers during their 27-point comeback? Why couldn't he take more of the burden off that series and carry them to the next round? When Memphis traded him halfway through the next season, it was definitely tough, but they still had a strong team without him and made the conference finals that year. In Toronto, Gay's results were eerily similar, but after going 6-12 at the start of next season, Toronto traded him away before going 42-22 to finish the year, while improving in most statistical categories. The Rudy Gay effect became a running trend around the league. He was known as one of the better scorers in the NBA, but also one that actively made your team worse when he was on your roster, and one that would instantly improve your roster when gone. He went to Sacramento where, well, there wasn't much that he could really help with, but while on the Kings, he did his thing a bit until he fell into injury issues and signed with the Spurs at the end of their 2-decade run. When his 17-year career had ended, he was the only player in NBA history to play 15 years and never win a playoff series. 17 straight fucking years of getting spanked in the first round is crazy. Rudy Gay was a talented player, played a long time, but never came close to winning basketball. Now, I will also note here, just because we've kind of ragged on Rudy Gay, that literally everyone who seemed to come across him at some point has stated that he is like the chillest guy of all time, so we'll end on a positive note for Rudy Gay. Next, we got Monta Ellis, specifically more on his Warriors days, where you can quite easily poke the same holes in his resume. Monta Ellis was in the same boat as Gay, although they weren't similar in terms of play style whatsoever. Monta peaked even higher as a scorer, putting up over 25 points per game in his prime, but similar to Gay, was never even selected to an all-star team. Monta could throw up high numbers of shots and score a lot per game, but he definitely didn't have the rest of the package. As an undersized 2-guard, Monta was quick as shit and could get to the tin quite a bit. He operated decently well in the mid-range, had a year or two where he shot well from 3, but all in all, being like a 6'3" slashing mid-range shooting guard who didn't really pass or defend obviously didn't lead to winning basketball. Efficiency-wise, he struggled. He only broke 50% in effective field goal percentage once in his career. I mean, don't get me wrong, Monta was talented. He dropped 25 a night, that's crazy. and he was entertaining as hell to watch in the meantime, but just looking at the box score numbers without context gives you an illusion that wasn't even close to true. In his prime, it was pretty much implied that he was going to go out for 40 about 4 or 5 times a season, but he balanced it out by going 2 for 14 with 6 points just as often. He dominated the ball, especially with the Warriors, and so when he had the ball, it was good luck to the rest of the team. I always thought Monta as a player was a bit symbolic. He had all the talent in the world, he was great at what he did, and carried the Warriors through some very down years. But his eventual exit after the Warriors chose to build around Steph rather than Monta, turning a bad team into a dynasty, really just shows you why these types of low-efficiency chuckers have become a pretty endangered species in the NBA. Ricky Davis's NBA career was pretty goofy, man. If you look up biggest ball hog in NBA history, you'll get a few answers, but the one you'll see most often is Ricky Davis, which is kind of strange given he isn't even the biggest name in the world. After battling some early career injuries, Davis was able to find a role with the early 2000s Cavs and became a 20-point per game scorer in his second season with the team. He was only 23, but there were a couple things that made you think, yeah, he's just trying to make his box score look good. In a game against the Jazz, he was 1 rebound away from his first triple-double, so like anyone would, he missed on the opposing basket to try to get a rebound, which he didn't. He got fined for it, and he never did anything that extreme again, but that play gave him the reputation he never lived down. When LeBron got drafted, his first thought was that he'd just be another role player who could take up space so that he could score. But after just 22 games with Bron, the team decided to trade him to Boston. There he almost won 6th Man of the Year, actually, while averaging 16 a game on a pretty decent team, before averaging almost 20 in the next season. He's certainly in the Hall of Confidence. He might be the dumbest guy to ever play basketball, but athletically, the guy was certainly gifted, even though he's one of the most selfish players of all time. When you look at his raw stats, his scoring output for the amount of PT he got looks pretty dang good. But these pre-LeBron Cavs teams were so shit, they kind of just let him chuck, since he had more talent than the next guy. For an NBA player, this guy seemed to not really take his career all that seriously whatsoever. When an announcer has to tell you to stop that nonsense, there's got to be something you're doing wrong.
He's going to get one here. Yes, he is. Come on, Ricky, stop that nonsense. That's nonsense, Ricky. Don't make the basket. Forget the show. He got 2, though.
He had a lethargic work ethic, he moped around like Eeyore at practice, poor leadership, and an apathetic demeanor. He would have been a pretty good player if he wasn't such a bonehead, because he had the physical traits and he showed that he was capable of scoring at an above average level. Stat-wise, his advanced numbers are what exposed him. For a player who had the raw stats that he did, you'd think something would stick out in a good way, but not much really does. His PER was just okay, his true shooting percentage was below average for the position. Even in his highest scoring season, he barely scratched 3 win shares. He did not play impactful basketball when he was on a bad team that gave him the ball and told him, score. Even though his triple-double attempt was just a bonehead moment, it was a pretty good representation for what his career looked like. He was funny to watch, I guess, for a little while, but if this dude was on your team, that quickly flipped to frustration. His confidence level was higher than his IQ, and until he evened out, it hurt him. The empty stats jokes write themselves about Terry Rozier, a guy who was just investigated for unusual gambling activity. But regardless, his high numbers in Charlotte were just as suspicious. Scary Terry became your everyday role player with the Celtics, but even back then, he was a low-key shot chucker. He was putting up a lot of shots for the time that he got, and he wasn't being super efficient. Rozier was pretty under the radar. There wasn't much super notable about his career prior to his Scary Terry 2018 playoff run that helped him get to Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals, and he kinda looked like a Kyrie protege in his absence during those series. But after literally one defining run of his career, he got cocky. He started throwing around the idea that he was being held back because he had to sit behind Kyrie Irving and Gordon Hayward, and he was very vocal that he wanted a new look. So naturally, he went to another renowned basketball powerhouse, that being the Charlotte Hornets. He pretty much traded places with Kemba Walker, and for a while there, it looked like he was going to be pretty much the same thing. We saw 42, 41, 87 shooting splits in the first season with 18 points a game. Rozier made it clear that he preferred to be the man on a shit team than to try to play a role on a good team. While Charlotte saw him as a player to build around in free agency, and the 25-year-old seemingly had the keys to the franchise. In his 4+ years with the team, Rozier averaged 20 points per game and shot fairly efficiently, but there was a gradual decline. In year 1, he was pretty efficient and added to his team's performance in nearly every facet. But in the last half season, his streaky shooting style was on full display. There's no doubt that a lot of his high-scoring totals came because there wasn't anyone to do it, between LaMelo getting hurt and that there was literally no one else on the roster. The only winning season Charlotte had in his time was when LaMelo was healthy for almost a full season. He had a plus-minus as bad as -397 in his first year, and the second worst plus-minus per 100 possessions on the whole team. He wasn't taking as many shots, but this last season, he shot almost career lows. He was forced to play as a complementary piece, and he fell apart. He struggled to find his footing, and in all of that, he got benched pretty quickly and underscored the idea that his impressive Charlotte numbers were legit. And then he made the statement that losing in Charlotte was just in the DNA. Which might be true, but you just don't say that shit, especially when you're part of the reason they're losing. Rozier is only really there for a quick paycheck and personal gain, it feels like. He went from averaging 23 to 16 while not really losing that many minutes, all because he went from a disorganized team to an organized one. In a more concentrated role with the Heat, we have also seen Terry's efficiency drop to near career lows, which hurts his case even more. In non-garbage time situations, the Heat were well off without him. And because I'm sure that there were a lot of garbage time moments in Charlotte, Rozier fed off the lack of competitiveness to get easy buckets. He was supposed to be a crutch when Hero or Bam are out of the lineup, but for a time there, his inefficiency was hurting every part of the Heat's offense. Bill Simmons called Terry Rozier's offense 80% of the production of Dame, but he shot that down a little too quickly. At the end of the day, Rozier isn't a bad player, but he killed all the momentum that he built in Charlotte the second that people started watching closely and noticing that what he was really doing wasn't that impressive. From a combination of chucking shots and a pretty poor attitude, Terry Rozier has proven at best to be a shot checker on a bad team, or a pretty poor role player for anything other than that 2018 run. A lot of these guys have made a killing off of playing for bad teams, but someone like Antoine Walker figured out how to stack up impressive stats even with a successful organization when he was with the Celtics. He was a 6'9" power forward with versatility that made him an occasional triple-double threat. As a second-year player, he became the focal point of Rick Pitino's Celtics, averaging 22 points per game and becoming an early career All-Star, but as the years went on, people had to look beneath his box score. In his early Celtics days, especially with the young Paul Pierce, he was a statistical anomaly. What stood out about his game was that he was shooting the three more than almost anyone else while being a power forward. He was shooting 7-8 threes a game at his peak, but most seasons people marked him down as a shot chucker. When asked why he shot so many threes, he said, because there's no fours. He had a personal hunger for scoring that rightfully put him ahead of his time, but the shit that he gets for his attitude and efficiency is just as warranted. Throughout his prime, the Celtics were usually mediocre. It wasn't until the 2002 playoffs that they were able to get to the Eastern Conference Finals. But even then, Walker's field goal percentage dipped beneath 40%, and the more efficient Nets took control. That was the story of his career. His game was built on high volumes of shots and dominating the ball, which took a lot away from those Celtics teams, including from teammate Paul Pierce, who ended up getting a lot more credit for those teams than Walker has. Once advanced stats like true shooting percentage came out, Walker's career began to tank. Celtics fans got frustrated that their next superstar didn't turn out to be all that, and people started asking whether or not he really deserved his 3 All-Star appearances, especially when he got older and was forced to play smaller roles. He tried to perfect a couple facets of his game while lacking in others like defense, and it made it impossible for him to succeed. He played a very confusing brand of basketball because he looked like a master of his class at times, before putting up the lowest IQ shot you could possibly think of, and there was no explaining it. He shot a career 63% from the free throw line, and definitely couldn't run and gun like a lot of other early stretch fours. When Walker left Boston, he was exposed quickly. He had to play with Nash, Dirk, and Michael Finley, and he didn't have the freedom to throw up as many shots as he wanted to, and because of that, his efficiency suffered even more. Rather than taking higher quality shots and making a bigger portion, he did the opposite. He shot 27% from 3 and 55% from the line. Somehow, it was kind of impressive. It was a coin flip on whether or not Walker was going to look good over the course of a season, and from his rough first year in Miami to helping them win a title in the second, he made 0 sense. And it wasn't like you could contribute to his defense, because that was arguably his biggest flaw. A couple seasons under Jim O'Brien showed that he was capable of being a decent defender, but every season you can mark him down as a negative on that side of the ball. At the end of the day, he was transformational for the game. His ball handling, court vision, and shooting abilities were better than pretty much any power forward of his caliber. But it's still not fair to say that his 23 points per game season were as useful and efficient as the next guy. When you think of 30 point per game scorers, your mind probably goes to James Harden, Steph Curry, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, but there's always a guy who sneaks into the conversation, and that guy was Jerry Stackhouse back in the early 2000s. Stackhouse was a throwback to high-flying wings that could score from anywhere, and his 29.8 point per game average in the 01 season had him only behind Allen Iverson. He still holds Detroit's franchise record for most points in a game, and on paper, it was one of the greatest seasons in franchise history. But why has that year gone mostly forgotten? He came into the league and did just what people expected after a 20 point per game season at UNC. But from coming in just 4th in Rookie of the Year voting, while averaging 19, to only getting out of the first round once with the Pistons, he doesn't have anything other than 2 All-Star games to show for his early career. He bridged the gap between the Isaiah Thomas and Ben Wallace championship teams, and his time in Detroit was characterized by a lot of selfish, inefficient basketball. But name 2 of his teammates from 2000, it was a bunch of nobodies. While his contemporary Allen Iverson was also kind of a shot chucker, he was a bit more efficient, and he played a brand of basketball that at least translated to winning, regardless of whether or not he had a little help. Stackhouse, on the other hand, was still the best scorer on his team, but he was getting shots up because there was no one else to do it for him. In 2002, he'd be sent to Washington to team up with MJ in a surprise trade, but when he talks about his time there, he says he wishes it never even happened. Meanwhile, the Pistons built a championship team, and did it with their leading scorer being Rip Hamilton at just 17.6 a game. And hey, you can't give too much credit to them for getting rid of Stackhouse, but when reporters use phrases like Stackhouse commands the ball to the point of intimidating his teammates, it's safe to say that there was at least something going on there. Apart from that one anomaly of a season, Stack didn't have too many other standout years. He turned into one of the better 6 men in the league in Dallas, and as a crutch for MJ in his real last dance. But he didn't turn into a perennial all-star or even get close to competing for a scoring title again. One thing that a lot of these guys have in common is that they moved around a lot. Teams don't want guys who can put up big numbers on weak teams. They want winning basketball, and by now, executives know that numbers can be deceiving. Stackhouse played for 8 teams, was waived twice, but fans still loved him. His career splits were 41, 31, and 82. But back then, AI and even Kobe were shooting close to that. What it boiled down to was that Stackhouse could only put up his high numbers when there was no one else to do it. If you take away that one season, you get a better feel for how good he actually was. He was solid and deserved a role as a leading scorer, but there was a reason why the Pistons got better after his volume got slashed as violently as it did. Thank you for watching if you made it this far, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and as always, I'll see you boys in the next one. Peace out.